Welcome back, in part 3 of Apple. Anyways, let's continue.
During his keynote speech at the Macworld Expo on January 9, 2007, Jobs announced the renaming of Apple Computer Incorporated to Apple Incorporated because the company had broadened its focus from computers to consumer electronics.
This event also saw the announcement of the iPhone and the Apple TV.
The company sold 270,000 first-generation iPhones during the first 30 hours of sales, and the device was called a game-changer for the industry. In an article posted on Apple's website on February 6, 2007, Jobs wrote that Apple would be willing to sell music on the iTunes Store without digital rights management, thereby allowing tracks to be played on third-party players if record labels would agree to drop the technology.
On April 2, 2007, Apple and EMI jointly announced the removal of the RM technology from EMI''s catalog in the iTunes Store, effective in May 2007.
Other record labels eventually followed suit, and Apple published a press release in January 2009 to announce that all songs on the iTunes Store are available without their fair-play DRM. In July 2008, Apple launched the App Store to sell third-party applications for the iPhone and iPod Touch.
Within a month, the store sold 16 million applications and registered an average daily revenue of $1 million, with Jobs speculating in August 2008 that the App Store could become $1 billion business for Apple.
By October 2008, Apple was the third largest mobile handset supplier in the world due to the popularity of the iPhone. On January 14, 2009, Jobs announced in an internal memo that he would be taking a 6-month medical leave of absence from Apple until the end of June 2009 and would spend the time focusing on his health.
In the email, Jobs stated that the curiosity over my personal health continues to be a distraction not only for me and my family, but everyone else at Apple as well, and explained that the break would allow the company to focus on delivering extraordinary products.
Though Jobs was absent, Apple recorded its best non-holiday quarter, Q1 FY 2009, during the recession, with revenue of $8.16 billion and profit of $1.21 billion. After years of speculation and multiple rumored leaks, Apple unveiled a large-screen, tablet-like media device known as the iPad on January 27, 2010.
The iPad ran the same touch-based operating system as the iPhone, and all iPhone apps were compatible with the iPad.
This gave the iPad a large app catalog on launch, though having very little development time before the release.
Later that year, on April 3, 2010, the iPad was launched in the US.
It sold more than 300,000 units on its first day and 500,000 by the end of the first week.
In May 2010, Apple's market cap exceeded that of competitor Microsoft for the first time since 1989.
In June 2010, Apple released the iPhone 4, which introduced video calling using FaceTime, multitasking, and a new design with an exposed stainless steel frame as the phone's antenna system.
Later that year, Apple again refreshed the iPod line by introducing a multi-touch iPod Nano, an iPod Touch with FaceTime, and an iPod Shuffle that brought back the click wheel buttons of earlier generations.
It also introduced the smaller, cheaper second-generation Apple TV, which allowed the rental of movies and shows. On January 17, 2011, Jobs announced in an internal Apple memo that he would take another medical leave of absence for an indefinite period to allow him to focus on his health.
Chief Operating Officer Tim Cook assumed Jobs' day-to-day operations at Apple, although Jobs would still remain involved in major strategic decisions.
Apple became the most valuable consumer-facing brand in the world.
In June 2011, Jobs surprisingly took the stage and unveiled iCloud, an online storage and syncing service for music, photos, files, and software, which replaced MobileMe, Apple's previous attempt at content syncing.
This would be the last product launch Jobs would attend before his death. On August 24, 2011, Jobs resigned his position as CEO of Apple.
He was replaced by Cook and Jobs, who became Apple's chairman.
Apple did not have a chairman at the time and instead had two co-lead directors, Andrew Young and Arthur D. Levinson, who continued with those titles until Levinson replaced Jobs as chairman of the board in November after Jobs' death. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs died, marking the end of an era for Apple.
The next major product announcement by Apple was on January 19, 2012, when Apple's Phil Schiller introduced iBooks textbooks for iOS and iBook Author for Mac OS X in New York City.
Jobs stated in the biography Steve Jobs that he wanted to reinvent the textbook industry in education. From 2011 to 2012, Apple released the iPhone 4S and iPhone 5, which featured improved cameras, an intelligent software assistant named Siri, and cloud sync data with iCloud, the third and fourth generation iPads, which featured Retina displays, and the iPad mini, which featured a 7.9-inch screen, in contrast to the iPad's 9.7-inch screen.
These launches were successful, with the iPhone 5, released September 21, 2012, becoming Apple's biggest iPhone launch, with over 2 million pre-orders and sales of 3 million iPads. In 3 days following the launch of the iPad mini and 4th generation iPad, released November 3, 2012.
Apple also released the third generation 13-inch MacBook Pro with a Retina display and new iMac and Mac Mini computers. On August 20, 2012, Apple's rising stock price increased the company's market capitalization to a record $624 billion.
This beat the non-inflation adjusted record for market capitalization previously set by Microsoft in 1999.
On August 24, 2012, a U.S. jury ruled that Samsung should pay Apple $1.05 billion, £665 million, in damages in an intellectual property lawsuit.
Samsung appealed the damages award, which was reduced by $450 million and further granted Samsung's request for a new trial.
On November 10, 2012, Apple confirmed a global settlement that dismissed all existing lawsuits between Apple and HTC up to that date, in favor of a 10-year license agreement for current and future patents between the two companies.
It is predicted that Apple will make US $280 million per year from this deal with HTC.
In May 2014, Apple confirmed its intent to acquire Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovan's audio company Beats Electronics, producer of the Beats by Dr. Dre line of headphones and speaker products, and operator of the music streaming service Beats Music, for US $3 billion, and to sell their products through Apple's retail outlets and resellers.
I even believed that Beats had always belonged with Apple, as the company modeled itself after Apple's unmatched ability to marry culture and technology.
The acquisition was the largest purchase in Apple's history. During a press event on September 9, 2014, Apple introduced a smartwatch called the Apple Watch.
Initially, Apple marketed the device as a fashion accessory and a complement to the iPhone that would allow people to look at their smartphones less.
Over time, the company has focused on developing health and fitness-oriented features on the watch in an effort to compete with dedicated activity trackers.
In January 2016, Apple announced that over 1 billion Apple devices were in active use worldwide.
On June 6, 2016, Fortune released Fortune 500, its list of companies ranked on revenue generation.
In the trailing fiscal year of 2015, Apple was listed as the top tech company.
It ranked third overall with US $233 billion in revenue.
This represents a movement upward of 2 spots from the previous year's list.
In June 2017, Apple announced the HomePod, its smart speaker aimed to compete against Sonos, Google Home, and Amazon Echo.
Toward the end of the year, TechCrunch reported that Apple was acquiring Shazam, a company that introduced its products at WWDC and specializing in music, TV, film and advertising recognition.
The acquisition was confirmed a few days later, reportedly costing Apple US $400 million, with media reports that the purchase looked like a move to acquire data and tools bolstering the Apple Music streaming service.
The purchase was approved by the European Union in September 2018.
Also in June 2017, Apple appointed Jamie Ehrlich and Zach Van Amberg to head the newly formed Worldwide Video Unit.
In November 2017, Apple announced it was branching out into original scripted programming, a drama series starring Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, and the reboot of the anthology series Amazing Stories with Steven Spielberg.
In June 2018, Apple signed the Writers Guild of America's minimum basic agreement on Oprah Winfrey to a multi-year content partnership.
Additional partnerships for original series include Sesame Workshop and DHX Media and its subsidiary Peanuts Worldwide, and a partnership with A24 to create original films.
During the Apple special event in September 2017, the AirPower wireless charger was announced alongside the iPhone X, iPhone 8, and Watch Series 3.
The AirPower was intended to wirelessly charge multiple devices simultaneously.
Though initially set to release in early 2018, the AirPower would be cancelled in March 2019, marking the first cancellation of a device under Cook's leadership.
On August 19, 2020, Apple share price briefly topped $467.77. Making it the first U.S. company with a market capitalization of US $2 trillion. We will continue about Apple in part 4, so stay tuned.